Okay, so we have a few more people getting in. So I'm Dina Justice, the COO of the ARC of Florida. And today we are delighted to have two experts in the field of estate planning and special needs planning. And I will introduce them. One, we have Jennifer Aiken, who is a board certified elder law attorney and the founder and managing attorney of J. Aiken Law, located in Northeast Florida. She's a member of both the New York and Florida bars. She dedicates part of her practice to helping families plan for their special needs child's future. This is very personal to her as she is a mother to a special needs child. And when she's not busy at the office, she enjoys time with her husband and her adorable children. We also have Brandon Arkin. He is an elder attorney with Solcup Legal PA, representing the elderly, the disabled, and their caregivers in all facets of elder law, including estate planning, asset protection planning, public benefits, incapacity planning, veteran benefits, and special needs planning. He is an active member of the legal community and is currently on the board of directors of the Academy of Florida Elder Law Attorneys. In the past, he has served as a director on the board of Dade County Bar Young Lawyers Association and as an executive council member of the Elder Law section of the Florida Bar. So we want to welcome both Jennifer and Brandon. And as we have promoted, this is a two-part series focusing on estate planning. Today, the main focus is going to be just a general overview on planning, and then we will pick up in October with a little more in-depth detail. So I would just like to say welcome. And when you are ready for the PowerPoint, let me know and I will share my screen.
I think we're ready, and if you could unmute Brandon.
Yes, okay, hang on one second here. We're gonna go unmute. That would be nice. Okay.
I have a voice.
Yes, you have a voice.
Yay.
Okay. Now I am going to share my screen and let me know if y'all can see the presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And thanks for doing this. I always have issues sharing my screen. It makes me really nervous.
No, that's quite all right. So you just let me know when we want to flip through.
Okay, so I'm Jennifer, and thank you for that introduction, Dina. I guess we can go to the first slide and we'll get right into it. Is that okay, Brandon?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to start?
Sure. Ladies first.
So like Dina said, I'm a board certified elder law lawyer, and I think everybody heard a lot of elder law in there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we just work with elderly people. Special needs law falls under like the elder law realm. And so when we say we're elder law lawyers, we do practice with special needs as well. This is just, I didn't put a picture of Brandon in here, and it's not.
He's a child. What are you talking about? You raised me.
Brandon is Arkin and I am Aiken. It just happens that we're really good friends. So, but that's a picture of me and my son Alex, who he's a little bit bigger now, but he'll be 10 on Monday. And Alex has autism. And one of the reasons I started to get into special needs law is because of Alex. And when I started, I really didn't know anything about anything, even as a lawyer. And Brandon and I have talked about this. There's just not a lot of resources out there for people with loved ones with special needs. And so we're hoping to get, we don't have all the answers today, but we're hoping to get your mind thinking about what you should be thinking about with your loved one, and maybe thinking about what some resources out there available for you. And then I know next series, we're going to get more into this. The trust planning and estate planning. Okay, Brandon?
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things that Jen and I bonded over was the need for more people to be involved in this type of planning. One of the biggest things I see with parents that have children with special needs is not knowing where to go, how to start, what to do, who to work with. And things can be confusing because a lot of people will have like special needs planning on their website, but that might mean that they do very basic trust, or they might do the full gambit of helping you get educational benefits for your child, working with SSI applications or, disability appeals and all kinds of things. So it can be hard to even find somebody because we all use the internet, but key terms don't make it easy to tell if a lawyer is good or not, or if they know what they're doing. And being able to connect with resources like, the ARC of Florida, which is just a phenomenal organization that I can't say enough good things about, is a wonderful place to start because, they're surrounded by all aspects of the issues that you're dealing with on a daily basis. So they're a great resource there. And Jen and I, discovered too by talking to our colleagues that a lot of other law attorneys have kids with special needs. And even us who are some of the top in the state of what we do and even in the country find that we struggle to help our own families with special needs to get benefits. Some things we'll touch on later on during our programs. I won't, prattle on too much. But yeah, so we'd like to, it's our absolute pleasure to help families going through these challenges and these goals to find the resources that best suit them. And we're just happy to be here. And thank you so much to Dina for having us.
Well, we are quite happy to have you for sure.
So you want to go to the next slide? Okay. So, I think when we hear a lot of times about special needs planning, a lot of people think of, trust planning and estate planning, planning for my child when I pass away or if I become incapacitated. But I think it's so much more than that. It's during your lifetime, getting the right tools in place for your child, education wise, legally wise, who's going to make decisions for your child when they turn 18. And so I think it's really important that special needs planning encompasses, during you and your child's life, and then at death, which we'll cover in our next part of the series.
Yeah, one thing that some people might find surprising is, when they ask, when should I start planning? To be honest, I think the advice is the same for anyone that has kids, whether they have special needs or not, is basically when that kid's born. Life is so unpredictable that we just never know what's going to happen. I think COVID was a really great wake-up call for these kind of issues. I mean, COVID's a terrible thing, but as far as seeing the unexpected, you have clients when I say, oh, you should consider, planning for your child, something happens to you. Oh, I'm healthy, nothing's ever going to happen to me. And then suddenly we're losing friends and family at early ages through this disease that just ripped through our nation and locked us in our houses. No one could have foreseen that.
No.
So, when dealing with kids, you want to think about things. And again, some of these things we'll touch on in more detail later on is, who's going to take care of my kid? Does that person have the skills? Do I need to develop a team around them? Is somebody good with financials? My brother's a CPA and my sister's a nurse. Do I want them working together? Do I want just one of them? Are there siblings involved? Do the siblings have the maturity, or do they want the responsibility of taking care of a younger child? Kind of having those things in place, because if something happens and you lose the ability to make these decisions down the road, a lot of things are going to get left to the court system. And I don't know about you, but when I hear about court systems, I usually don't hear glowy, fuzzy, warm things.
Don't?
Yeah. And I used to work for a probate judge and I did guardianship as well. And I'd see cases where parents had died, left money for their kids, and the caregivers would come in and say, hey, I want to send my kid to football camp. And the judge would go, I don't think that the kid should use their own money for that. I think that someone else should pay for that. And then the next day someone comes in and says, oh, we want to send the kid to science camp. And the judge is like, oh, that's great. Yeah, you can use the money for that. So it's just really subjective as to what that judge felt was a good use of the money. So that's always a kind of tricky thing. And then reaching out to the right people so you can get directed to the right agencies. Depending on what your kids' needs are. Some people, look at Amy Schumer's husband. He was diagnosed as being on the spectrum, and if you watch any of their programs that he's on, you barely can tell anything's off with him. Just that he's a little emotional. And then you have people whose children are fully disabled in a wheelchair, quadriplegic, and have completely different needs. So it's a wide range of finding the tools and the resources to do that is important, and to get connected with the right people to guide you there is quite challenging. You know, I know, Jen, your kid's in school and you're dealing with educational issues, which there's a slide for.
Yeah, I'll go over some of that.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
all right, so I think that's good for this slide.
Yep, next slide. And just why, before we get into, we hope they'll be our babies forever, but they're not. They grow up, unfortunately. I'm learning that. And so we all want to start thinking, about next steps. Like I said, transitional planning when they turn 18, making sure the right documents are in place. So
Yeah, again, the health and mental abilities are a spectrum, but so is finances and things of independence. A lot of people are often told by their doctor, "Oh, your kid's never gonna be able to do this." And then with hard work and not giving up on their child, the child overcomes great obstacles and is much more capable than they ever expected. And so you want to have kind of, looking through to the future. There's times where people say, "Oh, your kid's not going to make it past 4 years old," and the kid thrives. So the parents aren't thinking about, "Oh, do I need to set up estate planning?" Or, "Oh, who's going to take care of my kid? Because there's no way that the kid's going to outlive me based on what the doctor's telling me." But you have to get rid of that kind of thinking and do planning. And then, with the right people, you can look at what are the benefits that are eligible to me at age at 18 and younger. Once they turn 18, how does the law change? How do the benefits change? What do we need to be looking at? And then what happens when the kid's 60 or 70 years old? So you really have a lot to think about, and you don't need to overwhelm you more than you might already be, but sitting down with somebody who can really help you lay out this approach and that you can keep going back to is really important to think about these things, because you hope for the best, but you got to plan for the worst. And you got to learn about what's out there, because if you don't know, you're not going to get it.
Yep. All right, next slide. Okay, so that's what we've been saying. Now we don't have a crystal ball, and it's been said that the early years of every child, whether disabled or not, they're critical, as most parents know, because you stimulate the brain early, and we want to make sure that every child has the potential to become at their full potential. So, and that's planning. That's what's education going to look like for my child. What are our first steps? Who do we call?
Yeah. I don't have much more to add to this one.
We can go to the next slide. Okay. So, Brandon, do you want me to start on this one?
Yeah, and then I got some stuff to add into.
Okay. So one thing that I have come to learn about, and I know a lot of my clients have never even heard of the iBudget waiver, which is the Florida Medicaid Developmental Disabilities Individual Budgeting Waiver. And what this is it's run through the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. It's a Medicaid program. There's a long wait list. Okay, so knowing that when your child is over the age of 3, and there's some qualifying factors, but you would want to start that process of getting them on the wait list, because it can take a really long time to get off the wait list. This program can provide services for assistance in the home, therapies, small group home situations, medical equipment, medical supplies, all different types of things that your loved one may need. And I put some links there so you can get more information on what the iBudget program does, and more about the eligibility standards as far as what developmental disabilities apply, such as cerebral palsy, autism, spina bifida, so the Down syndrome. There's 6 qualifying disabilities, and then having substantial limitations with at least 3 life activities. So like self-care, mobility, self-direction, language, capacity for independent living. Brandon?
Yeah, and when Jen said there's a wait list for this program, it's a long list. I've talked to people who put their child on at age 3 and at age 12, they've still been on it. One of the determining factors that from what I've seen in my experience in getting benefits, is really documenting, excuse me, the heck out of the disability and the issues they need help with. Because when you go to these agencies, you go to the government and say, hey, my child's disabled, I want to get these benefits, they're going to ask you to show up and prove that disability. And depending on what the disability is, things can be trickier. I had a client who was dealing with a child that was deemed disabled with depression issues. And then when that child hit 18 and they went to redetermine the disability, the government didn't feel that he was depressed enough or disabled enough anymore to maintain his benefits. And I kind of keep going to doctors, going to therapists, and like documenting their records to show the disability, to show the help that's needed. That really helps a lot in dealing with claims down the road. Because there are a number of different benefits. We have the iBudget program, which is a state-based program. Then you have SSI, which is based upon income issues, and SSDI, which is based upon work record. And those benefits vary on what they give you access to. And sometimes your child doesn't have huge, per se, medical needs, like, wheelchair, respirators, different things, but they need help with work programs. And some of the access to those work programs can be locked behind a door saying you need to be eligible for Medicaid to get access to these other beneficial programs that are out there because they're only for a certain population. So always start early, start young, and document the heck out of what your child can and can't do, and with the right doctors and right associations.
Yeah, and even though it's a Medicaid program, there are income and asset limits. It looks at your loved one, a disabled child, as like a one household of one. So so they don't have their own assets and things like that, they'd be eligible. And if you're denied eligibility, there's ways to appeal that denial, and there's lawyers here in the state of Florida that do that. I don't typically practice with the iBudget. We typically refer that out. It's a very specialized area that in my office, I'm the only attorney. So
yeah, same. It's that's again one of the reasons why it's not going to be hard to find the right person to reach. Because to be honest with you, I'd have to actually call around to see which people I know that actually deal with iBudget in depthly enough to where they really are beneficial, like the way that I deal with Medicaid, and know the ins and outs of it. Part of the issue that I think that there's limitations on it is it takes so long to get off of the damn wait list.
yeah,
To get the benefits. I actually had a client who was a cop who told me her child was on iBudget, and I was like, really? Like, are you sure you're talking about the right program? And she managed to get him off because he had a crisis situation that caused her to basically call the police and became a safety issue, and they felt that crisis created enough of an issue of concern that he was eligible for a group home, and he's thriving in the group home. He loves it. He's doing fantastic. And she's still very close with him, but that instance, got her off that wait list because there are certain exceptions that can get you pushed off. So you do kind of want to keep trying your luck and not just get waitlisted and like forget you did it, and come back a year later or 10 years later and say, hey, what's going on?
Right. Be persistent. And you mentioned it, Brandon, there are crisis situations that can put someone or a child at priority on these wait lists. But I would say if you haven't heard about this and your child may be eligible, please look into it. Call the ARC or look in these, like Dean or Sarah Sullivan is mentioning in the chat that the ARC can assist. So just knowing it's out there, because I've sat down with so many clients as we start their planning, and I mentioned this and they have no idea. And I honestly had no idea until I actually started practicing. No one ever mentioned that to me when Alex was in school, or as we started our journey with therapies, different types of things. And I only heard about it because I'm an elder law lawyer and I do a lot of continuing education, and this was brought up at one of our events. So please ask, get help, look into it. Okay. All right. Do you want to go to the next slide? Okay. You want to start, Brandon?
Yeah, I'll start. It's only fair I do it once in a while, right? So one of the things that a lot of times people actually don't think about and kind of make false assumptions is how can someone take care of another person? So a lot of times when I have, for example, senior clients coming in, their child comes in and says, oh, I'm trying to help my mom out, and the bank won't let me access her bank account to help her. They seem very surprised. Like, why can I not just walk into a bank and say, oh, I know this woman, let me have her money? She's my mom, it's cool. And so having the right authority is important. So parents generally have inherent authority to take care of their kids. There are certain issues that come in, like if the child inherits money more than $15,000, that you have some oversight issues involved there, potential needs for guardianships. In this kind of context, what you're really looking at is how to best help your kid. Because when your kid hits 18, it doesn't matter if they're a rocket scientist or if they have the intellect of a 3-year-old and they're nonverbal, they are an adult. I had a woman who called me and said, my son is 280 pounds. He's completely incontinent. He's nonverbal. And the doctor won't talk to me anymore. Like, what's going on? And so in those situations, you're looking at a couple different things. So depending on the independence and the capabilities of the child, if they hit 18, they might be looking at doing a power of attorney, which is, in my opinion, the most important document anyone over 18 can have, period. Because it's what allows you to handle all basically non-health related issues. And you can actually put in some healthcare provisions in there for a person, banking, contracts, schools. So even if you're, college age kid, go to college and you want to help out with certain financial forms, or you want to talk to get access about their grades or certain things, or they went to Cabo and they lost their wallet and you have to move money from their bank account to pay their rent. You can't do any of that stuff without a power of attorney. You're going to get shut down. Also situations if there's a divorce in the family or, a deadbeat dad or something like that, making sure you have the right authority helps, because if the kid goes to a hospital, if you don't have a healthcare surrogate, both parents have equal decision making. So if deadbeat dad hears about it and says, hey, I want to suddenly be a dad, I'm on the birth certificates, the hospital will say, hey, go to court to deal with this, without having the right paperwork in place.
Right.
If a child is not as capable or there's other issues, a guardian advocacy can be a good option. That's basically where you go to court and the court provides some oversight and make sure everything is appropriate. Depending on how much money is involved, if you're just dealing with like social security benefits and it's very limited, then a guardian advocacy is a less restrictive way to go that still provides the ability to take care of your kid, make decisions. But it's not kind of as overwhelming where you have attorneys that are required to be on there on an ongoing basis. Whereas a full-blown guardianship requires annual recordings, requires a lawyer by law to deal with it. And there's also timing issues to take into consideration, like when should you seek out applying for guardianship. I'll turn that over to Jen, and then I might supplement a couple of things after you're done.
So yeah, we do a lot of guardian advocacy in our office. Typically what that, it is, like Brandon said, it's a lot less restrictive than full-blown guardianship. And what full-blown guardianship is somebody has to be determined to be incapacitated by a panel appointed by a judge. But with guardian advocacy, there's certain developmental disabilities that fall under the law, under the statute, that automatically qualifies a child to apply for a parent or loved one to apply for guardian advocacy. So and it's a little bit nicer. I mean, you still get that decision-making authority, but reporting is a little less intrusive. A lot of times for our families, we get reporting waived depending on the amount of assets that the child or loved one may have. You can actually start the process of applying for guardian advocacy within 180 days of the child's birthday. So a lot of times families like to get the process going, so there's no lapse. And when the child turns 18, they can still have that decision-making authority. what was I gonna say? Sorry. So you can do that. Is it expensive? I mean, you don't have to have a lawyer in Florida to actually do guardian advocacy. You do have to have a lawyer for regular normal guardianship, but not for guardian advocacy. But we've had clients try to start the process with guardian advocacy on their own, and it's the court system, right? Like, you have to file things and they have to be filed online. You have to have a portal. There are certain requirements of documents that have to be filed. Can you file for indigent status so you can avoid, a filing fee, so that because the child or loved one, they're allowed to have an attorney appointed, and that attorney can be paid if there's assets involved. So knowing all of those types of nuances, sometimes it's good to have an attorney on your side and doing this for you. And there is typically, I know in the counties that I practice in, we have a hearing. Some judges will sign off on it without a hearing. So there's no uniform with law rules with guardianship or guardianship advocacy in Florida yet. Hopefully that will come, but we find that every county is different with how they do the process. I will say St. John's is one of the easiest I've worked in. And so guardian advocacy it's really important to know about and to know when to apply for it, because we've had clients that their loved one turned 18, and like Brandon said, now they can't make decisions. And if they can't sign a power of attorney, if they don't have that capacity, I think you're in sort of like a holding pattern. And if your court or your jurisdiction, they don't work as fast as some others, it can turn into an emergency situation. So just knowing that it exists is really important. And just touching on advanced directives and power of attorneys, as Brandon did, if someone does have capacity, and some children too. I mean, we have children that turn 18 all the time that have some type of developmental disability, but they're able to understand what a power of attorney is and who they want to help to appoint to make decisions for them. I mean, we ask the questions, we sit down with them and analyze it before we actually allow them to sign it. But I think that's really important. It's even more less restrictive than guardianship. So, but like Brandon said, whether your child is disabled or not, any child that turns 18 should have a power of attorney in place if they can sign one.
Yeah, and if you're hearing our voice right now, you should have a power of attorney in place also.
Yeah.
Really, it's fundamentally a very important document. And one of the rare times we'll say, hey, if you're afraid to go to a lawyer, do something online at least, because something's better than nothing, but go to somebody who drafts them appropriately so they're done well and you don't run into issues. But one of the things that can be tricky too is, rights. So one of the things that with guardianship that can be done, depending on which type of guardianship you go through, is the child's rights to a certain extent can be removed from them, like the right to contract and things of that nature. And sometimes we have people who might not need to really do a guardianship, but they're afraid that as their child gets older, they're going to get conned or swindled, that they are going to, sign over the car that the parents got them for, $20 or a Nintendo Switch because they don't really comprehend the action there. And if they have the right to contract, they can do that. Now there might be some issues where you can say that person was a predator and go after them, but I've heard stories of people who inherited a house and then deeded the house away, and for basically not a real appropriate sum of money, and runs into some of those issues. So I've had clients who come in and say, hey, I think my kid's very capable, but with all these scams and internet predators out there, I want to be able to protect them from themselves. And that's why some of the things that we'll talk about later too can be important, like putting a house into a trust as opposed to having the child own the property outright. There's a lot of things there because as those needs vary and their abilities change,
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. Sorry to interrupt you really quick, but when you said contract, and like another one of those rights is marriage, right? And it's hard, right? I mean, even whether our child has developmental disability or not, if they're getting married, and I did have a case, and just because these rights are taken away, when they turn 18, it doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, there's always the court, right? You can always go back to court. And we had a case where the child turned 18, but he was very vulnerable to young women. And he really wanted a girlfriend, and but he understood the guardian advocacy and what that meant. He worked with his attorney, and in St. Johns County, we have a really kind judge. And he came to court and he wanted to be heard, and he told the judge, I want to get married. And not that he had a special person in his life, but I think the judge could see where, there would be some vulnerability. And the judge was I actually cried in court. He was so kind, and it was like, what, if you find the right person, you come back and we'll make sure that she's the one, and I'll, reissue a new order. So even though sometimes these rights are taken away, there's that core oversight. So if your child is able to articulate or get married or vote or whatever that is, it's not permanent.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree 100%.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Next.
So I think this is one, like, I talked to a couple of my friends about that their children go to school with my son. You really need to think about, who's going to care for your child if you cannot. And no one really takes care of our children as well as we do. And so, and I know that gives me anxiety and it keeps me awake at night. But, I think making that plan, and because if you're choosing someone or some people, you want to make sure they understand, like, your child's who they are. And like my son, he likes to have his 2 cups of cocoa every morning, and if he doesn't have that, school doesn't go well for him. So those things mean a lot to me, and I know they mean a lot to Alex. And so even though it seems really little, I want the people that we've appointed to be guardians of our children if something happens to us to know what Alex needs to get at any of our children, right? Even our little ones. My 3-year-old loves her babies and she can't function without them. So I think talking to family members and making sure you can get that peace of mind, knowing that if something happened, your child would be taken care of. And this will go into estate planning when we talk in our next series, but I think just throughout your lifetime and your child's lifetime, you need to be thinking about this. I'll get into care managers. Brandon, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is common when you do planning is kind of like a letter of intent, people call it, or a friends and family letter, that kind of lays out those important things. They're saying, hey, this is what my kid needs to function. These are favorite clothes, these are foods that they're averse to, medicines or entertainment. The favorite movie is whatever. The favorite thing to do is video games or look at documentaries online about animals. The kind of things that only a parent, that only you know about your kid. You want to provide that guidance. And I think that a lot of lawyers don't sometimes walk through that enough with clients. I was at a national conference for special needs attorneys last year, and one of the attorneys developed this great flashcard system where she would use it to go over how she would draft trusts for people. There are certain things that you have to have in a trust, but she actually went through and said things like, what's important for you? Is it more important that money be preserved for the child's medical needs, or would you rather, preserve quality of life? And say you had $5 million in a trust, you might not really need Medicaid, right? But for the parents, is it more important that the money be preserved for their long benefit, or do they want that the trustee to be able to make sure they're going to Disney every 6 months? Things like that, where you actually go through and think about how you're going to leave instructions and how you're going to kind of govern these rules for the people coming after you to provide for the family. And also too, talking things over with those caregivers. A lot of times people will name somebody as a trustee in their trust after they pass away and not talk to that person about it. And that person doesn't find out until, like, you see like in a rom-com, that, oh, this person passed away, now I'm in charge of their kids' money? Like, what? That really happens.
Yeah.
You know, so having that conversation, I know some lawyers that will actually even bring in the trustees, especially in special needs situations, to talk about what the responsibility is going to be. What should you know in caring for the children? So a lot of times, you know, the word holistic is very, you know, kind of hippie-ish, but it's very accurate in that special needs planning is very holistic in that you need the right people. You want an attorney who understands the situation. You want to have care managers like Jennifer's going to talk about, the backup guardians in place. You're going to want to have maybe an attorney that deals with ADA issues, like your child is going to school where there's not a ramp for their wheelchair or something like that, or they're trying to, you know, rent a home, but it's not handicap accessible. There's all kinds of sub issues that a lot of people don't even think about that are interconnected. Having the right financial advisors that can guide you to invest properly and have the right financial vehicles to prepare. Like, you have life insurance for your kid. How's your kid? Where's the money coming from to take care of your kid? You know, do you have long-term care insurance that if you get sick, you can care for yourself and still have money left for your kid when you pass? All right, I'll flip it over to you for the care managers.
Well, Brandon knows I love care managers.
Yes.
We in my practice, especially with my elderly clients, we use care managers, and they are, you know, they're people that come in, they assess the situation, the psychological, social, medical needs. They can develop care plans, they coordinate services and resources, monitor progress. So a lot of times we use these when, you know, the client's family lives out of state or out of the country, and they want eyes and ears advocacy, things like that. So, but lately I have been working with families, and like I said, the biggest fear is who will care for my child if I'm not here. Their medical needs are very important to me, that this is followed. And even though they're appointing a family member, like a brother or an uncle, to be that person that steps in, they may not necessarily have that health background, or they're not there every day. They don't know what the care needs are. Maybe I have a client where the uncle lives in Seattle and is not around every day, and will step in if she passes. She's a single mom, and she's really worried about the care. And so what I've been suggesting is having these families talk to care managers, you know, and they start now. They start the conversation now. I have one client that hired a care manager to come in. They went over all of the medical files. They went over the routines of the child, and it changes, but it gives the child, some of these children know this person knows their routine, they know their medical needs. And so if something happened to mom or dad, or your caretaker, you know, there's someone that knows. And that way the guardian or that's being appointed isn't just left blind and not knowing what to do.
Yeah, it's a big concern. And you know, also one thing too, that a lot of times people don't want to acknowledge because they feel it's selfish, is self-care.
Mm-hmm.
You know, caregiver burnout is a very serious concern for anyone taking care of a caregiver, being a caregiver, whether it's for children or for their parents. I had a wife who basically had a breakdown taking care of her husband, and half the people in the psych ward with her were there for caregiver burnout. You know, so having people in place where you can say, hey, me and my husband need to get away, or me and my wife, or, you know, whatever your preference is, need to get away from vacation for a couple of days. It's not a selfish thing to do, but having it to some people who, you know, can care for your child, who understand your child, that your child maybe knows and feels comfortable with already, can be a big thing, because, you know, separation anxiety can be a problem. To really have that in place, and, you know, sometimes it's the right people for the right job. I had a client who loved their child very much, but couldn't deal with the 30 phone calls a day about my faucet seeking. Oh, the toilet's here, I need $20 for whatever. And just have a small trust with a care manager in charge to handle those kind of miscellaneous tasks that was just burning her out. So there's all kinds of ways of strategizing these things to really make things effective. You know, and then two, a lot of things to take into consideration is what are you doing with the siblings? You know, are your siblings, are the child siblings willing to take care of the child? Do they have the responsibility to do that? There's certain things that we'll probably get to, again, that will be repetitive, but you know, doesn't hurt to be a little repetitive. Some people say, oh, I'm just gonna leave all the money to my child's brother, and the brother will take care of everything. And that's a terrible idea for a lot of reasons. You know, or I'm just gonna disinherit my child. Like that's all, you know, a terrible idea generally. And we'll get to that in some later slides, but there's a lot of things to take into consideration. So, you know, knowing how these things work is really vital because sometimes it's hard to undo mistakes or costly or both.
Right. And I think you made a good point. Like, you know, a lot of times it's, you know, their sibling will take care of them, right? And maybe now that's the case. Sibling is single, doesn't have their own family, and seems like it'd be they're really close. I get that a lot. And I mean, and that's great. But you know, like we said before earlier in this presentation, you know, we don't have a crystal ball for anybody. And so, you know, siblings' life may change. They may get married and then they have that, you know, they have a spouse and maybe spouse doesn't want their disabled sibling to come live with them and things like that. And I think, I mean, that goes into what Brandon said, like, no, we wouldn't want you to leave all your hard-earned money to just one child. We want to, you know, prepare and plan for your special needs child, because what if this situation does happen? And I think it's really sad. I mean, Brandon can probably attest to this as well. There's a lot of times when we're sitting down just doing basic estate planning, and their families are telling me about their estranged children, and they don't understand. They grew up, they all loved this loving family, and now all of a sudden this child doesn't want to talk to them anymore. And so it happens. And no matter how close your kids are, or, you know, you have to have a plan in place. You have to think about alternatives. I know for our kids, you know, we're like, okay, they're a lot younger than Alex, our other two kids, but you know, like I said, we don't know where they're going to be. So, you know, we look to care managers, we look, you know, to other family members for support for them. You know, we don't want it to just be all on them. And that's what I got on that.
Next slide.
Okay. Do you want me to touch on that?
This one's all you. This is that.
Yeah. So, you know, so we started, I'm just going to give you a little background. I know we don't have a lot of time because I do want to give time for questions. But when I first started this journey, I didn't know a lot about a lot. And we started at a private school for Alex, and they typically don't do IEPs in private schools. And so I felt, so I really didn't know much about this. And we were realizing that Alex wasn't getting the education or the support he needed at this school we were paying a lot of money for. And there are scholarships out there, McKay Gardner. If you have questions, I didn't really put that on there, but there are scholarships out there that can help pay for a private school. But we decided to take the public school route, and we had to go through the process of getting an individualized education plan, an IEP. And it's just a plan that you meet with your schools and school board. There's just a lot of different people involved in this meeting. And it's a written plan outlining what your child's needs are and how those are going to be met in the school system. And it includes inclusion. So that's important for us, that Alex is mainstream during certain parts of the day, meaning he's in a special needs classroom, but he's also with children with average abilities. He does recess, lunch, and things like that. But I think what's important to know for me, to tell you, is about IEP advocates and attorneys that can help. We went through something this year where, you know, I didn't ask enough questions last year. I really just thought, because of the school district we live in, I just assumed that everything was going well, and it wasn't. And we ended up filing due process against the school. And I used an excellent advocate. I had an attorney involved, but the advocate was really beneficial, and she wasn't expensive. She really wasn't. And it opened my eyes to a lot of, you know, ask questions and challenge the school, because, you know, they will send home reports once in a while and data, but sometimes it's not true and it's incorrect. And to have somebody that really understands how that works is really important. We get a lot of phone calls in our office. Will Jennifer go to IEP meetings and things like that? No, we don't. It's so specialized that we don't do that. But I have a lot of people throughout the state of Florida that I know that can help with IEPs and advocacy. So if you think something's not right, you have to challenge it, because at the end of the day, like, we are, like, as parents or caretakers of special needs children, like, we're the advocates. Like, we're our kids' #1 fans, and we are the ones that have to make sure everything's right for them.
Yeah, it's important, and working with different programs like ARC, other organizations that are there to help and support people with special needs, turns into a great resource center to find professionals and to provide caregivers and to deal with these kind of niche issues. I had a woman who called, and she had called 10 other lawyers before calling my office and looking for assistance with her child not getting the right education at the school that they were with, not being provided for the way the law provides for someone with his disabilities. And while we don't handle that issue ourselves, I have a friend at the local legal aid who was given a grant to deal with those programs. So when we were able to provide her his contact information, she was literally started crying and said that those other 10 attorneys basically told her to jump in a lake. Couldn't even point her in the right direction. And so that's why, working with somebody and that has a team and then knows the connections and knows the right people for you to reach out to is super important.
Yeah. Yeah, it can change your life, because it's changed mine, or Alex's more so. So
huge.
Next slide. Oh wait, before we touch on this, I just want to go back really quick to something Sarah said about guardian advocacy on the chat. Yes, every county is different, and like in my county, some of my counties I practice in, they allow you to do the indigent status, so you don't have to pay filing fees or for the child's attorney, even if you apply before the age of 18. But in some counties, if you try to do that before the age of 18, they'll use the parents' assets to decide. So it's really county by county. So you should know that and look into that. Sorry. And I know we're going to touch on ABLE accounts a lot more in the next session, but I just wanted to mention them. So if you wanted to start looking into them, and Brandon, maybe you can talk a little bit about what those are.
What's nice about ABLE accounts is it's also a chance to provide independence. So essentially, these are attached to 529 accounts, which a lot of people use for college accounts. That's where this kind of stems from. But this is really there to empower independence for people with disabilities. It's a way of setting aside an account, and that you can even have like a debit card too, where money can be put into the account, but it doesn't have some of the same restrictions and rules attached to it like a SNT or a special needs trust does. So it provides a little bit of flexibility, and you can also use it in conjunction with things. Like some people can take money from a special needs trust and fund it into an ABLE account where the child can have, some play money or some money to have some independence, but not, lose all their money and blow it, kind of thing. So this is an account that you can have that if you want to be able to keep maintaining your government benefits, you can't have more than $100,000 in it. You have to be diagnosed with a disability at age 26 or younger, but I believe there's a law that's likely to pass that's going to raise that up to, I want to say 40 something. You have to forgive me, I don't remember off the top of my head. When the law passes, I'll know the number. The age. But you can use money for things that you normally couldn't. And so for SSI, for example, there are certain things that you're not supposed to have paid for you, like certain housing expenses and certain food expenses that can lower your monthly SSI amounts. But when you use funds from the ABLE account, that doesn't affect that. There's actually specific exemptions for that. There are some great programs put on by the ARC. There's some great programs put on by the people that run the ABLE accounts as well that really go into substantial depth on this. But this is just really a great tool to have in conjunction with planning, and can also really just provide independence. Because me personally, I think as much independence that you can give somebody is so empowering.
Mm-hmm. So, and we can touch more on that in our next our next episode. You know, and how able accounts can work with special needs trust, which is what an SNT is, and you know, having both to work together to set up your child in the best financial situation as possible. So, we can go to the next slide. So, just other things to think about, like Brandon had mentioned, your mental health, making sure you're taking care of yourself as well. There's support groups out there. There's lots of Facebook groups that are very county and city specific. I'm on them. It just as a mom, not as a lawyer, and we've gotten a lot of resources from that. You know, I'm going to skip the family members and long-term care plan and let Brandon touch on that really quick. I know it's almost 1 o'clock, but and just looking at other resources like the ARC, family cafes, and I think it's typically at the end of May, June in Orlando every year, which is just a convention of, you know, different types of resources that come together, and it's a couple, you know, like 3 or 4 days long, I can't remember, but it's just a way to get more resources. Nathaniel's hope is to get some support. So just looking into all of those types of things, just to help you as a caregiver, you know, stay sane and not get overworked or overtired. So,
Yeah, I think that's, and to me, again, not to be repetitive, I feel this is so important to have the right people around you and having different supporters. I mean, and also too, one thing that I kind of personally hate, I don't know about you, Jen, is I hate lawyers or professionals that hold themselves out to do something they don't really do. You know, so you come to them and they say they do some wills and trusts, and they don't really know anything about special needs planning, but they know that in their software drafting program, there's a button that says special needs trust be put in this will. And then you say, hey, I've got all these concerns about my kid who has special needs, and they're like, oh yeah, I got you, and they don't got you. You know, that's to put it kind of so bluntly. So you really want someone that works with those things. So like a financial advisor that understands those issues, a CPA accountant that understands how to do tax filings for the special needs trust, who knows how to write off the medical expenses your child's incurring, you know, the right organizations to help with job training and life skills training. You know, when you put those things together, it's just so beneficial for you, for your child, for the families that you're even working with, because by being a community, you all support each other. It's just so powerful to me. And just kind of having that right team there, because not knowing how these things work, not knowing about the rights for, you know, accessibility for someone who's disabled, you know, there's certain issues like if someone who is deaf calls our law firm and wants to hire us, I have to pay for the legal interpreter. It's under the ADA Act. So out of my pocket, I can't charge the client if we need to hire an interpreter, because the basic interpreter that you use on the phone doesn't understand legal terminology. And, you know, so you might run into a lawyer who doesn't know that, you know, or tries to get you to incur unnecessary medical expenses. But yeah, working with planning things out, financially, working with an advisor that could put you maybe in some smart, low risk investments so that the money can last longer. We can also work with the child and be involved with disbursements, potentially, you know, having your family members work together, but sometimes too, and trust people, and we'll get into this next time, people will actually have kind of this like advisory panel of people who say, hey, trustees, I want you to work with this doctor, I want you to work with this financial advisor, I want you to work with this care manager to make decisions for our child and help guide you. It's really important to really think through these things. I really can't, you know, state that, you know, strongly enough. I feel like there was something else, but I forgot.
yeah. Did you mention using like long-term care planning? If you have, did you mention that?
Well, so yeah, so I mean, you know, setting up the insurance for long-term care, you know, for yourself as well is important. You know, there's a lot of different policies out there that you can work with a financial advisor, where it can be a life insurance policy, or it can turn into a long-term care rider. There's like these hybrid policies. There's a whole different ways of funding through life insurance for your child, making sure that's set up, making sure that the beneficiaries are set up properly on your accounts, because there's a lot of ways that inadvertently just kind of mess things up for your child. With the law side, we'll go into more
on the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you anything you want to add about long-term care? Or?
No, I'm good. So I think that was it. I know it, we,
Well, I did want to, we've got a couple questions in the chat. And I know Sarah has her hand raised, so I will
She's such a good student.
unmute yourself, Sarah.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So, long-term care insurance, I'm just gonna tell you from my own personal experience with my family, is so important if you qualify for it and if you can afford it, because assisted living without any kind of government help or qualification, which is probably going to be a majority of people, the cost of assisted
I
living
did unmute, but I still can't hear anything.
is incredibly expensive. Like we're talking like 400 square feet apartment for 3,500, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 a month. So the reason this is important is because if you are planning to have this nest egg to set aside for your adult disabled child, when you pass, you want to make sure that you have enough money to do that. And if you're burning through it because you didn't plan for yourself, then you run into a problem. So that's just my little tip from my own personal experience, is if you've got millions of dollars in the bank and it doesn't matter, and you can hire 24/7 care, or you can afford the penthouse at the assisted living facility, great. But I would say 99% of us are not in that position, and we have to, I always say to people, like when you're in the airplane and the oxygen mask come down, give yourself the oxygen first and then give it to your child. Do your plan for yourself first and then for your child, because they kind of go hand in hand. So, and I will step away from the presentation.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. So we did have a question in the chat, and either Jennifer or Brandon could answer. Can Center for Independent Living Consumer Specialists be an advocate for the child in the IEP?
I have never used them. I don't believe. Do you have any experience with them, Dean?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not familiar with that program, but that just goes to kind of what I've been harping on, is that there are so many organizations out there that it's hard to be familiar with everything. And also some things are more popular in certain areas than other areas where they have better support or better resources. You know, all ARCs are great, but you know, they'll some of them will claim to be better than others. But everyone I've dealt with is phenomenal.
I do know that at the IEP, the parent and student can have whoever they want there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I would say that yes, if the consumer, student, and parent wanted someone from the Center for Independent Living, then they can perfectly, in their rights to be there.
I will say this, that I learned when I did my due process and my IP, things like that with the school, I represented myself as a mom. I didn't come in as a lawyer. And so when we were in resolution and mediation, they couldn't have their lawyer present either because we didn't have a lawyer. But I did have my IEP advocate there. So it kind of worked out in our favor.
Okay.
I'm not saying don't use a lawyer, but sometimes,
Right.
The IL specialists, they can act as well, I should say they can do the IEPs and assist with the IEPs as well.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments for Jennifer and Brandon?
And I put our contact information on the slides.
Okay, and I am going to send out
share the slides.
presentation. Yes.
But I know for myself and Brandon, maybe I'm speaking for you, but if you have questions or concerns, you need guidance, we're always happy to help.
Great. Okay, Mary, you had a question? You're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Yes, it's in the chat about the adults.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me go back to it. So so the question is, why would a professional private guardian insist on a guardianship clause to allow them to apply to be the guardian put in a durable POA?
So there's go ahead.
So it sounds like this this person wants to have, is being chosen as the agent of their power of attorney for, this person, and they want a clause in there saying that if they need to down the road, they can apply for guardianship and have the right to do that for the person that they're overseeing. Now, some of the issues with that could be that one, if you don't have the authority and power of attorney, things are difficult to do. There's also a statute that governs who can be the guardian of a person. So if there's a conflict, with somebody coming in saying they should be the guardian over the person that the parent had chosen, that could be an issue. So having that right in there, and if that is a concern too, the parent should have a pre-need guardianship designation for the child, or that person should have pre-need guardianship designation set for themselves, so they can articulate in advance who they need should a guardianship be needed. A pre-need guardian is basically a way of telling the courts ahead of time, hey, if someone tries to get guardianship over me, I've chosen these people, and this is my preference. But when you go to court, things can be ugly. So having as much support as to why you should be the guardian is there. And sometimes there can be ethic issues. Like there was actually just a change to the attorney's ethics rules on dealing with clients with, you can call it disability, now it's called diminished capacity, where there was some issue on whether or not we could insert ourselves as guardians for a client if we felt that they were losing the ability to handle themselves. There's a lot of stickiness in there when you're a professional in these kind of roles, because there's so much room for abuse in the system. So I mean, that's just kind of my feel on that situation. Jen, any thoughts?
If
No,
they
that
have, they have doctor's letters that they're competent to manage and direct their own finances and healthcare to sign the power of attorney, so there's no question there, and the goal is to not go into guardianship. Why would the professional durable POA insist on that when it has the ability to endure, even if for some reason they do become incapacitated?
Well, and there could be issues where the authority isn't as extensive as needed, or something changes where a guardianship is needed. Like let's say there's a cognitive decline for some reason, and that person's now acting irrationally and spending their money and giving their money away to their friends and wants to deed away their house. And then it's deemed that a guardianship is needed to protect them and actually remove some of their rights because they are no longer able to handle it. These things can be a spectrum, and you never know what happens down the road. So that could be part of it. But honestly, if you don't trust the person, if you don't have a good vibe for them, don't use them. Go with your gut on it, or consult with a couple other people and see, in that area if that's something that's an issue. Odds are that something happened in that guardian's career, or and this issue arose and they weren't able to help the person properly. Or they could be trying to put them in a guardianship down the road. But remember, a court will have to say that the power of attorney and healthcare surrogate is not good enough before they'll do a guardianship for that child. So they'll have to prove that it's needed through the court system. But guardianship can be a little sketchy with professionals. There's a lot of things that happen in Florida that aren't great for publicity.
Thank you. And I think Kathleen had a question.
Yes, I have two questions. If you can only answer one, that's fine. I understand. I thank you so much for being here and, helping all of us navigate through this complicated system for our loved ones. I guess my first question is on a special needs trust. What is your opinion on using a corporate trustee? So that, because I know that things can get very complicated, when a person passes away. And if you have a corporate trustee, my understanding has been that they're the ones that can navigate through all this and say, okay, we'll make sure this is good, that's good, taxes, because the person who's doing all this, when somebody passes away and everything's going into an account for, the special needs child or adult, a lot of times it's just too complicated, and the people that are handling it, family members, have no idea. They're overwhelmed, and it's just beyond their capacity to handle it.
Are you going to be able to be on our next talk? Because we're gonna be covering trust and trustees and
Oh,
things
yes, I
like
am.
this. Okay,
Yes. Okay, so the next talk is October 10th, right?
don't quote me, but
I think it's the 11th. It's a
Okay.
Wednesday. Let me double check my calendar. It is Wednesday, the 11th.
Okay, perfect. I will be at that one also, because that was my question, corporate trustees. And then this is probably equally as well, it's on trust protector. So that's for the following.
yeah, that would be really good for the next
Okay,
episode.
perfect.
I keep
Thank
calling it
you so
episode,
much.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, we certainly appreciate Jennifer and Brandon taking their time to educate us today. And be sure and register for the October part 2. We will be sending out copies of the presentation today and a link of the recording once it's on our YouTube channel. So again, thank you very much and have a great Wednesday.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you for
everybody.
your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Hmm.